Good evening. Happy Lord's Day to you. We're going to begin tonight in Proverbs chapter 4. I was looking at the wrong place. But first, the commercial. This is the commercial for Wednesday night. We're starting a special class this coming Wednesday. I mentioned it this morning. We're hoping to stir up some evangelistic fervor. Amen. Yes. We want everyone to be on the lookout for lost souls, and lost souls who would be open to the gospel. And you might have to ask several times. You might have to mention it several times, but we can keep asking and talking to people until they tell us to hush. And when they tell us to hush, maybe just one more time to see if they mean it. But we are here because someone was interested in teaching us the truth. And I know there are people in the Choctaw community and in your life and in my life who are interested. And I know I get turned down a whole lot more than people listen to me. But I think we need to be ready when the time comes. And we'll talk more about that on Wednesday night. This class, we're going to be talking about evangelism, about reaching out with the gospel of Christ. Going to train you, teach you, and train you how to use a specific study guide. It's not the best, it's not the only one, but it's one. And if you don't have one better, then you need to learn this one. And if you've got one better, you need to show it to me and teach me how to use it. And that's what we're going to be getting into this coming Wednesday night. So please come. If you're listening online and you have the opportunity to come Wednesday night, please come. If you can't be here, listen online. We need to be reaching out to people with the gospel of Christ. It's not called the Pretty Good Commission. What is it called? The Great Commission. And that commission is what saved you and me. Somebody carried the gospel so far as this place and this time. And that is what has become our salvation. All right, the lesson tonight, talking about wisdom. We're starting in Proverbs. Now we're going to jump, as soon as we read some and start in Proverbs to get us started, we're going to go to James, but then we'll come right back to Proverbs. At least that's the plan anyway. Proverbs chapter 4. Solomon in Proverbs personifies wisdom, talks about wisdom as if she is a woman. And he is talking to his son. That's what Solomon is doing in Proverbs, so that's the context. And this is what he says about wisdom, the lady wisdom. Chapter 4, verse 6. Do not forsake her, and she will guard you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom. And with all your acquiring, get understanding. Prize her, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. That's what Solomon says about wisdom. In all you're getting, get wisdom. And we get stuff, don't we? We like to get. We like to go to the store and get the things we need and some things that we want. Sometimes we get some things we think we probably would really enjoy but shouldn't have. But to balance that off, we go and get some healthy stuff too, right? We get stuff. And Solomon says, in all you're getting of houses and lands and cars and whatever it is you get, in all you're getting, get wisdom. Acquire wisdom. This is very encouraging to me because of the Olympics. I watch the Olympics, and what I watch when I watch the Olympics is people doing things I know I'll never be able to do that. How about you? I mean, how hard would I have to work to be able to do 1/10 of what one of those Olympic athletes does? Except maybe curling. I think I could be a pretty good curler. Yeah, I don't know if I'd be the sweeper guy or the shusher guy. I don't know if he's called a shusher or not. Wouldn't that be a good name for the guy who shoots that disc down there? And if anybody's listening to this and you're a professional curler, I apologize. I don't mean to offend. But I can't do gymnastics. Well, I don't know. The first stage of gymnastics is tumbling. I can do that without even trying. But I can get wisdom. Even at my age, I can get wisdom. Even at your age, whatever age you are, you can get wisdom. You can acquire wisdom. That's what Solomon is saying. And all you're getting, get yourself some wisdom. And he talks about wisdom here, and we just read a little bit of what he says wisdom will do for us, but he goes on to elaborate how much wisdom will do. But it seems pretty obvious after we live out a little wisdom, what wisdom can do for it. The honor it can bring, the peace that wisdom can bring, the godly satisfaction that wisdom can bring. So keep a finger in Proverbs, and now let's jump to James. James talks about wisdom more than once. Talks about it in chapter 1. And he says this, it's sort of a warning, but it's a good warning. In chapter 1, verse 5, he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. So what do you do if you lack wisdom and you want some? You ask God. That's what James says. However, he must ask in faith without any doubting, for the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord. So this desire for wisdom, this request for wisdom comes with a warning or an admonition, if you will, from James. Holy Spirit inspired him to say that. Tell him, if you're asking for wisdom, you better mean it. To me, this is kind of like when somebody says, I want to be a Navy SEAL. All right, you want to be a Navy SEAL. What do you got to do to be a Navy SEAL? When you find out what you have to do, what you have to endure, what you have to go through to become a Navy SEAL, you might back up on that desire and that request. You might, well, I'm not sure if I want to do that. God says, if you want wisdom, ask me. I'll give you wisdom. I'll give it to anybody without reproach. But you better mean it. And here's what I get from this. A lot of wisdom comes from experience. And a lot of the experience that gives us wisdom is not pleasant experience. Do you think Job was wiser at the beginning of the book of Job or at the end of the book of Job? Right. Even Jesus, the Hebrew writer, was inspired to say of Jesus, he learned obedience. Think about that. Jesus, the creator of heaven and earth, the one who spoke the universe into existence, learned obedience through the things which he suffered. The things which, now I don't understand what that means that Jesus, God, learned something, but that's how the Spirit had the Hebrew writer to put it down. He learned obedience through the things which he suffered. And much of the wisdom that you and I can gain in life will only be gained through a certain degree of difficulty or effort being put forth or suffering going through. If you want to talk to somebody about war, for example, you want to talk to somebody who's been in the trenches, who's been in combat, who's been there. That's the guy who really knows. You don't want to talk to some guy who's read books about war. You want to talk to somebody who's been in war. You want to talk to somebody about trauma medicine. You want to talk to somebody who's been in the emergency room in places where they have a lot of trauma. You go to the big cities like Chicago, New York, LA, where they're bringing in gunshot wounds all the time, bringing in knife wounds all the time, bringing in people who've been mangled in car accidents. If you want to talk to somebody about trauma, who knows trauma, you need to talk to somebody who's been in that experience. And it's the same thing with wisdom. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I don't think it's what James is trying to do, and I'm sure that's what Solomon is not trying to do. But he's letting us know, he's giving us a heads up. If you want to get smart, sometimes the way to smartness, really wisdom, is a difficult path. However, there is always a payoff that makes whatever path you've been on worth it. It's always true. It's always true. Some things you can't get the easy way, but once you've got them, nobody can ever take them away from you, and that seems to be the way that wisdom is. All right, let's go back to Proverbs. I got some categories of wisdom, and you can see those in Proverbs as you read through Proverbs, and I want to encourage you to do that. Just read through Proverbs as you read through, there will be proverbs that don't really jump out at you, but there will be other ones that slap you in the face. Because they'll speak to you and where you are at this point in time, and in 2 more years, you'll read it again, and it'll be different passages of Scripture, different truths. But there'll be some you'll hang on to. You'll grab them, and you'll remember those, and you'll learn them, and you'll remember them, because they speak to you all the time. That's just the way Proverbs are. Let's talk about the tongue and some of the things that Solomon said about the tongue. Chapter 9 of Proverbs. Chapter 9, verses 7 to 9. He says, "He who corrects a scoffer gets dishonor for himself, and he reproves a wicked man gets insults for himself. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will still be wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase his learning." What is Solomon saying? The only way to correct a scoffer is with words. You got to talk to them. Somebody's scoffing, somebody's arrogant, somebody's throwing themselves against something, and you're saying, wait a minute. Let's back up here. And he's saying, don't correct a scoffer. If he's a real scoffer, you'll just get dishonor for yourself. If you reprove a wicked man, that's the kind of scoffer he's talking about. He's not talking about somebody who says, well, I don't know about that. I got my doubts. I got my questions. That's not a scoffer. A scoffer is one who has an arrogant attitude and who mocks, and he says, don't even worry about that. Remember what Jesus said? Do not cast your pearls where? Before swine. Give not your holy thing. Put not your holy things before the dogs. That's what Jesus said. If they don't receive you when you take the gospel of the kingdom to that house, what do? You shake the dust off your feet. That's what you do. So in some cases, you don't even address people if they're wrong and they're arrogantly wrong. Just let them go. But then he says, reprove a wise man, and what's he going to do? A wise man will love you. Give instruction to a wise man. He'll still be wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he'll increase in learning. Now we read this, and I read it at first as if I am one who's going to do the reproving. Okay, Marty, remember, only reprove a wise man. You reprove a wise man, it'll do him good. But am I not to infer from this that when somebody reproves me, I need to behave in a wise fashion and get better for it, rather than, what's the word, buck against the discipline? I need to be the kind of guy who can be reproved, because if I'm gracious in reproof, I'm going to get wiser. That's what this says. I'm going to increase in learning. So this is a two-way street. But that's how you do it. You do it with the tongue. Chapter 10. For me, it's right across the page. Chapter 10, verses 19 to 21. When there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. Does that make sense? Now, keep your finger there and go to chapter 17. Well, where did I see that? Yeah, chapter 17, verse 28. Oh, you're ahead of me. Even a fool, when he keeps silent, is considered what? Wise. When he closes his lips, he's considered prudent. You know, we have a saying like that. You keep your mouth shut, people will think you're smart. It's when we open them that people find out, oh, he's not smart. Chapter 10, 19. Many words, transgressions unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise. The tongue of the righteous is as choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of understanding. The lips of the righteous feed. What's that mean? They feed many. Is that talking about a bologna sandwich? No. That's talking about real food. Food for the soul. Food for the heart. Jesus talked about hungering and thirsting for righteousness. and the lips of the wise will feed with righteousness, and there won't be any dissatisfaction. But fools die for lack of understanding. It's like they starve to death because they do not eat what they need to eat in the way of wisdom. Chapter 15. Let's go to 15 first. Don't want to miss this one. Chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. Solomon says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable, but the mouth of fools spouts folly. A gentle answer turns away wrath. You've been there. You've been in that situation where you know, I'm going to have to say something, but I can say it one of two ways. And one way can really take things a bad direction. It's something you have to think about. You got to be careful. A gentle answer. Sometimes people say, pardon me, they say stupid things. And you probably know, you understand, they don't mean to be stupid, but they've said something that needs to be corrected. And you can say to them, perhaps it's your general way to say something to them like, you're stupid. And it may be true, and what they've said may be stupid, but is that the way to approach it? A gentle answer turns away wrath. What do we do with our words? We impart information by the words that we speak, but here's something else we do with our words. We show people how much we care about them. And if you care about someone, you care about a relationship, and something's been said that, oh man, this needs to be addressed, you can address it in a way that shows them, I care about you, and I respect your dignity, and I respect you. And I don't want you to suffer for what you've just said, but I need to give you an answer. I need to respond to what you've said in such a way that shows I care about you, but that corrects you at the same time. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable. Have you ever had someone tell you that you've been an idiot, but they did it in such a nice way that you thought, well, I have to agree with him, and I'm glad to because of the way they told me? Sometimes we do things that need to be corrected. But when I'm corrected, do you know who I want correcting me? I want somebody correcting me that I know cares about me and loves me and is going to be gentle and kind with me. That's what I want. I don't want somebody who's going to give me what I deserve because of what I've just said or what I've just done. I want somebody who's going to be merciful and gracious. How about you? And I think that's what Solomon is saying here. And besides, you want to get me mad? Well, you can get me mad. You can get a lot of people mad. But the point of a Christian ought to be to turn wrath away, which is what Solomon is saying we can do with our words. Chapter 25. Verse 11. Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a word spoken in right circumstances. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. Like the cold of snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his masters. I find this all very interesting. Apples of gold, can you picture those? Apples, gold and apple in a setting of silver. You got the contrasting colors, the gold and the silver, and you get a beautiful picture. And it's like, wow, that's pretty, that's beautiful, that's pleasing to the eye. And what Solomon is talking about is here words that are appropriate, pleasing to the ear. They have an aesthetic. Now that word aesthetic, that just means beauty, attractiveness. I remember years ago, I talked to this guy who built longbows. And I said, why do you hunt with a longbow? You know, a longbow, it looks just like a curved stick with a string on it. Today we've got these compound bows that have all kinds of pulleys and wheels and gadgets, and you might have a 100-pound, nobody has a 100-pound bow, but if you have one, you could pull it back and be holding 30 pounds because of the technology and all the wheels and the fancy stuff. And it's got a level on there, so when you get it back, you can see if your bow's leveling on. And it's got a sight with optic, what's it called? The stuff that gathers light. Anyway, you've got a sight that gathers light from the sun and it makes the pins bright. It's all this fancy stuff. But longbows don't have that. They're just like a stick with a string. And I asked the guy, why do you hunt with these instead of a compound? And he said, because there's a certain aesthetic to it. I had to go to the dictionary and look that word up. I didn't know what aesthetic meant. And it meant beauty. I thought, beauty? And the more I've hunted with a longbow, the more I found out he's right. The simple beauty of what we now call a stick and a string is so much nicer, so much more pleasant than hunting with a fancy technological bow. Nothing against fancy technological stuff, but there's something beautiful about getting back to the simplicity of a plain old bow because it's just so beautiful. And words that are fitly spoken. There are times when you don't want to say just anything. What do you say to someone when they've lost a loved one? Now, I hope that you've done some research on this, because how many people do we have in this congregation who've recently lost loved ones? Sometimes the best thing to say is nothing at all. Just let them know you're thinking about them. Give them a hug. Put your arm around their shoulder. But if you do say something, do a little research. Some things can be said that are helpful. Some things can be said, and you don't mean to be harmful, but it's just kind of irritating. Now, I don't know if you've ever said this or not, but if you ever tell someone, oh, they're in a better place. Now, that might be true, but it's almost like saying you shouldn't feel bad. Well, no. You got a right to feel bad. You lost a loved one. Maybe they are in a better place, and that's a great thing to think about. But does that really comfort you when you've lost a loved one, especially if you know they're in a better place? Sometimes feelings need to be validated. I don't like to live my life by feelings, but we have feelings, and there's no denying that. And sometimes those feelings need to be validated. And that's what we can do with our words. Here's the thing. If you love somebody, you'll show them. They'll see it, even if you fumble over your words. And here's the thing about praying, talking to God. What does Paul say about our prayers in Romans chapter 8? He says, we don't know how to pray. That's why God gives us his Holy Spirit to intercede with groanings that can't be uttered, because we don't know how to pray. But when you find the words in a circumstance that really help. I've expressed this before. Sometimes when the service is over, somebody will say, hey, great sermon, great sermon. And that I don't mind somebody telling me it's a great sermon. That's better than a lot of things I could say about the sermon. But what really does me good is when you say, I really appreciate what you said about this. Boom. And I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just letting you know we all like this. You can tell some, oh, you look really nice today. Or you could say, you know, that color really looks good on you. Or that cut, or that piece of jewelry. There's something specific you could say. And it's even written into this, apples of gold in settings of silver. There are ways to say things if we would think about it, and that's what this all comes down to. Thinking about things, about how we say things and what we say. Solomon is saying a word fitly spoken. It's like an apple of gold in a setting of silver. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. All right, move on. This whole thing seems like it's going to be about the tongue. Well, all right, a couple more on the tongue and then we'll move on. I've only got about 5 more things we'll look at 10 or 12 verses each on. So, yeah, really, you got me. Right. Chapter 26, verses 4 to 5. Proverbs 26, verses 4 and 5. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you will also be like him. Answer a fool as his folly deserves, that he not be wise in his own eyes. Boy, does that sound like a puzzlement? Somebody who is a fool, you can imagine what they might say. And if you answer him the way he makes that foolish statement, the same way he makes that foolish statement, you're going to be just like him. We say it this way: don't get down on their level. If you get down on their level, you'll be just like them. However, if they need to be answered, Solomon says, answer them as their folly deserves, so they are not wise in their own eyes. Sometimes the answer to somebody's foolishness is simply to ask a question. I know this because people have done this to me. I'll say something stupid, and somebody will ask me, you think that's the best attitude? Well, what am I going to say? Yeah. And just dig myself a little deeper? If I'm smart, I'll go, well, that's a good question. If we're smart, we'll back up a little bit from some of the things we say, but here's how our pride works. And pride is one of the things I might be talking about in a little bit if we've got time. But here's how pride works. We say something, we make a statement, and no matter how dumb it is, if somebody calls us on it, we feel like we have to defend it. No. If it's a dumb position, dumb statement, dumb behavior, don't defend it. Own up to it. You know what? You're right. Thank you for reproving me. Didn't he just say something, and we just read something about that? You reprove a wise man, he'll love you for it, and he'll be the better for it. Sometimes the way to be a fool is in response to reproof. Somebody loves you enough to call your hand on something. Thank him by saying, I appreciate that. And don't be dumber than you already are. Do not answer a fool according to his folly. You're going to be like him, but answer a fool as his folly deserves, that he be not wise in his own eyes. Something to think about. One last word on the tongue, chapter 30 and verse 32. By the way, these we've looked at, they're not the only ones on the tongue. They're just the ones I picked out for us to look at tonight. Solomon says, if you've been foolish in exalting yourself, or if you've plotted evil, put your hand on your mouth. That's where your hand should be, right there. If you foolishly exalted yourself. Or if you've done what else? Why does Solomon mention these two things together? You've exalted yourself or you've plotted evil? Because to me, Solomon is saying they're pretty much equivalents, plotting evil and self-exaltation. By the way, have you ever thought somebody was really great because they told you they were really great? Yeah, I hear you laughing. See, that's because we know that doesn't work at all. But then somebody wants to tell you how great they are and brag about all the things they've done. And all it does to me is I just get bored and I think, you're pretty obnoxious. I never have heard somebody brag on themselves and said to my, oh, they're a really great guy. No. That's not the way that works. And that's what Solomon has said. So when I'm tempted to tell somebody something great about myself, and here's the way we sometimes do it. We don't go into it directly because that would be too obvious. No, we just want to drop a few hints here and there that tells people how well-traveled we are and how well-read we are and how smart we are and who we might know. Now, there's nothing wrong with talking about places we've been and books we've read and people we know. But if we do that because we're trying to show people, oh, look how great I am, it's the same thing as this. And Solomon says that's not the way to be. If you've been foolish in exalting yourself, or if you've plotted evil, put your hand to your mouth. Shut yourself up, is what he's saying. That's pretty good advice, don't you think? And have you done this in a conversation? You're conversing And I know we talked about some of this not long ago in a class or sermon. I don't remember where it was, but you're so interested in telling them what you've got to say that you're not really listening to what they're saying. As a matter of fact, the first chance you get, you'll just interrupt them. Just stop them from saying what they're saying so you can lavish them with your wisdom and knowledge and your opinion. And do we do that? Sometimes we do that. And that's rude. And few people are ever impressed by that. And I've started asking myself, I don't ask myself nearly enough, but I've started asking myself in a conversation, do I really need to say this? Why am I fixing to say this to impress them? What's the point? As Christians, what we say to others ought to be for their benefit. We were talking about worship this morning. When you read 1 Corinthians 14, what Paul writes about the worship assembly is everything should be done for edification. Everything done in that assembly should edify. And so when I think about that, I think, well, everything that comes out of my mouth ought to be good for edifying, building people up, encouraging people, not boasting about myself. Everybody already knows how great I am, right? Everybody already knows how great you are, right? Right? Well, maybe not, but they don't need to know that. And they sure don't need to hear it from me. All right, let's just talk briefly about material wealth. I've got a couple of other topics we'll save for later, but I wanted to talk about material wealth from Proverbs because this is something we struggle with. We like to have things, but we don't want our things to overcome our love for the Lord. Just like Jesus said, you can't serve two masters. You can only serve God or wealth, mammon, the King James has, material things. And I know I probably told you, when I was a kid, I thought, how come that's not God and the devil? You can't serve God and the devil both. Well, because we never serve the devil, but we serve material things. But there's a balance, and I think Solomon helps us to see that. Proverbs chapter 8, verses 12 to 21. Here's the personification of wisdom again. This is what she says. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way, and the perverted mouth I hate. Counsel is mine, and sound wisdom. I am understanding. Power is mine. By me kings reign, and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, all who judge rightly. I love those who love me, and those who diligently seek me will find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even pure gold, and my yield better than the choicest silver. When you look at what Solomon is writing to us about wisdom, he says if you embrace wisdom and you live wisdom out in your life, one of the natural results of being wise and practicing wisdom is an increase in wealth. Riches and honor are with me. Enduring wealth is with me. That's what Solomon is saying about. Now, not all of the riches and the wealth are material. Because you know, if you've lived very many years in this world, there are ways to be wealthy that are far beyond the material things. But Solomon, I believe, here is talking about the material things. In chapter 10, Solomon says this about material things. Chapter 10, verses 22 to 25. It is the blessing of the Lord that makes rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. What's he saying? He's saying if God has blessed you, either materially or spiritually, or if God has blessed you anyway, don't feel bad about that. Don't put yourself on a guilt trip because you've got something that nobody else or somebody else doesn't have. That's not... God gave you what he gave you for your good, and he doesn't add any sorrow to it. He goes on to say, doing wickedness is like sport to a fool, and so it's wisdom to a man of understanding. What the wicked fears will come upon him, but the desire of the righteous will be granted. When the whirlwind passes, the wicked is no more, but the righteous has an everlasting foundation. When we embrace righteousness, we embrace wisdom, we've got something that will last, and that's what we need in this world, something that will last. Chapter 11, verses 24 to 31. There is one who scatters and yet increases all the more. And there is one who withholds what is justly due and yet results only in want. The generous man will be prosperous. He who waters will himself be watered. He who withholds grain, the people will curse him, but blessing will be on the head of him who sells it. He who diligently seeks good seeks favor, but he who seeks evil, evil will come to him. He who trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like the green leaf. He who troubles his own house will inherit the wind, and the foolish will be servant to the wise-hearted. Solomon is talking about having wealth and using wealth, being generous with wealth, to impact others in a positive, good way. And he says if we do that, it's going to be a blessing to us. Now, how can you scatter, like he says, but it results in prosperity? What's he talking about scattering? He's talking about scattering seed. You've got good. Scatter your good in the sense of blessing a lot of people with it, and there's going to be good come from this. The generous man is going to be prosperous. That's what Solomon says. One who waters will himself be waters. You've got something good that you can sell to others, sell it to others. Now, it's interesting, he doesn't say give it away. He says sell it. Be a source of blessing. Aren't you glad there are merchants in this area that you can go to and you can buy the things you want? I am. Yeah. I don't expect to be given those things, but I'm glad there's somebody around who can sell them to me. Chapter 11. Nope, that was chapter 11. The last one, chapter 27. Proverbs 27, 23 to 27. What I've hoped to do in all this is to give you a little taste of Proverbs so that you'll keep coming back to this book for the wisdom that endures and that will bless your life as it's blessed mine. I don't consider myself wise, but when I practice what I know to be wisdom, it always does something good for me. It always has a good result. That's God fulfilling his promise. Proverbs 27, verses 23 to 27. He says, know well the confidence of your condition of your flocks and pay attention to your herds. Riches are not forever, nor does a crown endure to all generations. When the grass disappears, the new growth is seen, and the herbs of the mountains are gathered in. The lambs will be for your clothing, and the goats will bring the price of a field. And there will be goat's milk, enough for your food, for the food of your household, and sustenance for your maidens. What's he saying? Saying God gives you good things. Take care of them. Use those things for your benefit. As time goes on and the seasons change, your prosperity will increase. This isn't anything to feel bad or guilty about. Rather, it's something to be grateful for. And I don't know about you, but I'm grateful for the wisdom that's here in Proverbs. These are just a few things that we can look at. I hope you will do your own research into Proverbs, and you'll find those passages that really, as we say in our vernacular, that speak to you. Some of them will mean more than others, but all of them will mean something. So I encourage you to go to Proverbs. Tonight, as we've been talking about wisdom, I don't know where you are in your relationship with God, but it's not wise not to have a relationship with God. We're going to stand and sing a song of encouragement. If you're outside of Christ, we'd like to teach you about him and baptize you into him. And if you need the prayers of the church, we'd like to offer those for your benefit as well. Just let us know by coming forward how we can help. Let's stand and sing together.